private Christian school is in a big way. What is the difference between Christian and public schools? Why is Christian education important to consider as a viable option? I'm your host, Dr. Rich Hoffman, and on this episode of Ask Christian Counseling Associates, join me with our special guest, Dr. Merle Skinner, the Executive Director of Christian Family and Children's Center in Champion, Pennsylvania. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ask Christian Counseling Associates, and Merle, great to have you here today.
Oh, it's great to be here, Rich. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. So Merle, we've known each other for years now.
Yeah.
And, as time has gone by, we've gotten to do a lot of things. But we were connecting for a while at the American Association of Christian Counselors.
Yeah.
And we started off on, we did a poster session together.
Yeah, we did. It was kind of fun, wasn't it? We talking about political involvement and getting Christian counselors involved politically to maintain mission, be able to maintain mission.
Yeah. So when I think of what we've done together, I think of, we were going to develop, I forget what the poster session was about, but it was advocacy. It was an advocacy project.
Yeah, we were. If you remember, we were trying to help people, particularly counselors, understand how their mission could be affected by political decisions, particularly around licensure and worldview, which are things that are passionate to both of us, and the threats.
So we were at the Capitol together on I think a couple of times.
At least twice.
To promote biblical worldview and counseling. And that started all there. So I think about those days, when I think about our work, I think about the Capitol and being there. So would love to talk about any kind of political issue or that work, but also your professional work. Yeah. You're a doctoral level licensed professional counselor.
That's correct, yes.
You have a counseling center in Champion. Yeah. And also, what's more longstanding is the Christian school network that you have and direct and have founded. Yeah,
it is, and it's kind of actually more complex than that, Rich, too. We have really a center, and out of that center, we have a school program, Christian school program, and the counseling program, but we also do a lot of community activities. In fact, we're right now in the middle of a project to actually build a full-size gymnasium auditorium complex to be able to host concerts and speakers. So we're really try to be embedded in the community, in the Tri-County community, and doing what we do. So
Tri-County is Fayette County, Westmoreland, and
Somerset.
Yes. Okay. So just catch me up on that. Tell me a little bit about all the stuff that you do professionally and in ministry.
Sounds great. Well, okay. So interestingly enough, we just celebrated are getting ready for our 41st anniversary at the center. So
congratulations.
So it's been an exciting role. My wife and I founded that. God called us.
And it's your anniversary today too.
Yes,
I found out before you got here. 43 years.
43 years.
And so you're celebrating that, being on the podcast, commemorating it.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I've got these major life events going on, like center anniversary. My family's Barb and I have been married since we met in high school, but we actually got married right out of college and started the ministry a year later. So we were babies, and so a lot of cool things about that, but a lot of great people that the Lord has brought through that. The interesting piece of it all is that it has started by program, and we serve a rural area, which those counties have cities, and we're in Greensburg now, but the reality is a very diverse kind of population. From rural America to Fayette County struggles with impoverishment in some areas, so lots of diversity in that. But the center has been our mission is to provide Christian programs for the family. So although we did a school program, and we now have had three preschool programs, one in Ligonier, one in Indian Head, and one in Donegal. We have 3 campuses.
Okay.
But we have K through 12 program. We have 2 campuses, and one in Donegal and one in Champion. So lots of interesting things going on there, but it has really been a community-based ministry. So we actually were not intending to start a school originally. It was out of the early ed stuff that the people said back in the 80s. They said, hey, we really like this. We'd like to have this Christian worldview stuff going on through school. So we've done that. A community Christian school piece there. Lots of very interesting things going on. I think we might get into some of that today, but just what's going on in education. Education is now the Wild Wild West in terms of what's happening.
Yeah, you said it. So I think in general, there's still people out there that are like, wow, I would like to do Christian schools, but I don't know how far the difference is between public school and Christian school. I don't know if I want to get into all of that. Maybe some of the biases are, well, that's where the kids go who can't make it in the public school, and so even though it's Christian, it's really a whole bunch of bad kids. Yeah. And I can't think of any other challenge off the top of my head, but that would be an example. Like, yeah, what do you find that people think about it? Like, what is really the difference that they're going to find?
When you really come down to it, it's really about worldview. It always has been. Okay. We were talking about worldview with Francis Schaeffer back in the 70s and 80s, that the difference between education is, there's a lot of technique. 1 + 1 = 2. That's God's truth. It doesn't matter who teaches it. Yeah. But the reality is when you start thinking about heart and mission, calling, identity, start thinking about the cultural view on history. How do we view history? How do we view science? What are the biblical thinking about that? So for us, really, the Christian education means that God's at the center of all of it. And so we deal with those things.
Yeah. So people think about science a lot and say, like, well, science is science. Now, we've been all the way through education, and it's always, just from a technical standpoint, people choose assumptions that science is based on. But then what I've experienced, and I don't think the public just gets this, that you take the science that you want and you leave the rest out, and that science serves your agenda. Yep. And that's, you stick somebody in that environment who it'll take them 20 years to figure that out, amazingly.
Yeah.
And they just get one viewpoint of what the world is like naturally.
It isn't. And there's no conversation about that. It'd be interesting if there were conversations from worldview. But when you walk into a secular university and you take a science class, they don't say, no, there's a big debate between creation and young earth and old earth and evolution. And let's talk about the facts that support each one of those positions. People don't have that conversation. Now,
right, that's not there at all.
From my perspective, in a Christian worldview, you do. You have multiple perspectives about that. And you have Christians all over the board on that. But it's really interesting. Most people find they're terribly surprised by the evidence that supports a literal 6-day creation. Now, again, that's a theory. It's a theory that many people believe are based on Genesis, and it's one I happen to agree with. But it is a theory. God was the only one who was there. He's the only one that can talk how this happened. But when you actually look at the science around that, it's amazing. So.
Yeah, and that could be one of the differences that are huge when you hear that this was evolution, Big Bang theory. You're billions of years old, and then all of a sudden, if you're in church, automatically Genesis is not accurate,
right? And
there's no scientific way to work that out in that view of things. And then you learn later on, if you're fortunate, that there is many, many, many scientists who can justify a young Earth theory that fits right in the Genesis. And there's plenty of Christians out there who ascribe to that, plenty of intelligent, scientific Christians who say there's no scientific problem here.
Yeah, and there's many secularists that do too. They can't figure it out, but they're such good scientists that they cannot ignore the data. So they say, we have no idea how this happened, but it sure looks like it did.
I'm just remembering Ben Stein. I was in Texas in 2008 debating. I was in this crazy. It was called Church and Society 1, where every environmentalist position was being debated, and I knew nothing about it. But I had that one thing is I had 25 pages of scientists in 8 font who ascribed to a theory, young Earth theory, other than evolution. Yeah. And it's a lot of people.
Yeah, so going back to our original conversation about Christian education, if Christian education is going to do its job well, it has to talk about all that stuff. And it has to put things in perspective in a way that's healthy. Same thing's true about history. And really, truly, people say, well, math is neutral. Well, it's not really, if you start looking at it, because if you look at math, it really does point to an orderliness that didn't come out of necessarily chaos. So anyway, all of that.
So there's new math and stuff like that. I really don't understand that part, but what I do just have a memory of too as we talk is that I was an undergrad at Pitt, and I was a bio major. That's how I started out.
Okay.
And so I had bio, chem, and physics. And I wasn't really a stellar high school student. I did not have my studying together or anything like that. But I also was just doing things that I was motivated to do. And I remember very clearly hitting this bio class, and the way that it was presented, I mean, there was just nothing in it for me.
Yeah.
There was no purpose, and it was very evolutionary. And I can't say that at that point I disagreed with that,
Right.
Because I hadn't committed my life to the Lord until I was 19, So, but it was just it was just dead.
Yeah.
And now I think of, okay, that science, Christians who are scientists investigate the natural world to glorify God and to see, and investigate how he did all of that.
Yeah.
And wow, I think of that now and be like, wow, would that be a really, really neat thing?
Yeah.
To be engaged in for anybody.
It is. And I saw a meme the other day. True science points us to worship. And I believe that's really true. If you look at science, it points you to this amazing creator. And we can go through all examples, the anatomy of the eye, all kind of stuff. That just really does. And so for us, for those of us involved in Christian education, spoiler alert too, I got some political information for you that's just hot off the press.
I'd love to talk about politics,
but
for sure.
We'll have to share about that because there's some stuff coming out of Harrisburg that hasn't been announced yet, but it should be very amazing. But but when you look at that stuff, you say, why would we not want that? Why would we not want? So we are not everybody fits in Christian education, and as you said, there's lots of kind of stuff. But for our school program, there's a lot of opportunity to do that, and there's an awful lot of opportunity to do the similar things that we do in terms of mental health. So think about that. I mean, I know you know this, Rich, but cognitive behavioral therapy had been really great if Christians would have figured that that's very biblical, right? I mean, but no, we waited for secularists to identify that, and say, and then we say, oh yeah, we'll jump on the bandwagon. But wouldn't it have been cool? Wouldn't it be cool if by our Christian worldview, we were driven to do research that made sense that the Bible, in terms of mental health and science and education. So worldview matters. It really does.
Absolutely, and I think when you say CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, every therapist out there ears light up. So have a lot to say about that. But the one thing that we really say a lot here is that if a family has a high education value or a high value on education, then that's one of the three things. The other two being, if you had a mom and a dad in the household who stayed married, and that your parents were healthy enough to provide adequate parental supervision, and then if they valued education highly, that on any measure that people feel disadvantaged on, you're going to end up at the top.
Right.
And nowadays, so many people don't have all three of those, maybe not even one of them.
Right.
But how you make it through education. Because I say the Christian community has all three of those. They value those things highly. It's inherent, in a biblical worldview. But if the church can back away from it, but they should value education highly, and that's the one that they're most cloudy on, because we believe that there is truth, and that we should set people up to learn those important truths in life and investigate them, and that's, in a sense, academic. And then, that you're out there and you can discover those things, guided by God's word, that, that gets you through 8 hours a day in a school setting, that justifies why you should sit in a seat, behave yourself. And without that, I don't know why you would.
Right.
And
honestly, and I think that's part of my concern about what's going on in the Wild Wild West out there. And a lot of that is to advantages of private schools and Christian schools and things.
Yeah.
But the reality is we are throwing the baby out with the bathwater with some of this. And so you look at liberal arts education. And again, I'm really very, very proud of our graduates that are running shops and mechanics and making billions of dollars running heavy equipment and all of those things. Those are very valued and important professions. But so is the idea that we can learn how to think, and we can learn how to think creatively about multiple things. And so, we kind of invented the liberal arts thing. It's been hijacked. Let's face it, like a lot of things in culture. But the reality is that I hate to see us abandoning higher education just because of the traits. I mean, there's a way that should be able to be integrated, and so I think we've got a lot to figure out there. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do and we're trying to think about, and a lot of people are right now, is how do we value, and not say everybody needs to go to college or everybody needs to just make a lot of money. How do we get purpose? You're back to where you were talking about. Why is this biology class? Why does it mean something to me?
Well, definitely I think about, you're a person who understands what liberal arts education is all about.
Right.
And that's been lost.
Yeah.
Does that mean it's liberal? No, it doesn't mean.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Rich, because we don't want to.
And so I don't know if you want to define it, but I understand it to be that you understand about all these things in society. It's like a well-rounded education, so that you can learn how to think and lead other people and society in knowing the truth about these things.
Right. So Rich, around that, our high school kids go on a mission trip every year. It's it's mandatory. Yeah. So we took a group to Alaska this year.
Wow.
And most of them are not going to go live in Alaska. Most of them are not going to learn how to live with sun deficits and things like that. But what they learned, and while they were helping there, is going to prepare them for life in multiple ways. We take kids to the Dominican Republic. Again, most of them aren't going to become missionaries. Most of them aren't going to become, third world, but they understand what they're experiencing in a whole different light and a perspective. So that and whether it's that or whether it's studying, that idea to be thinkers in the image of God is really an amazing idea.
So cognitive behavioral therapy. Let's talk about that for a minute. Most everybody who comes here now is like, what's your theoretical orientation? It'll be a CBT, and from there, how do you exactly understand that? But the most unfortunate part about CBT, this is my opinion, is that it lends itself to a very linear approach.
Yeah.
And so here's step 1. Here's step 2, here's step 3, or what we would call the cookbook approach. Now, I definitely agree with the general community, clinical community will say that, CBT can be very effective. You can use it to help people, and that's great. What's not great is a counselor who's going to be, you're on step 1, and now next becomes step 2. And so what I've run into lately is, and we don't, here we practice acceptance and commitment therapy, a faith-based version of that. You can integrate all different kind of things.
Absolutely.
In there. Now, me and you could talk about that forever. I don't know. There's probably a sector of people listening to this be like, what is
they
this
just
even?
Turn us off, right?
Right? Like, we're going to talk about CBT. What's worse? And then I think about, if I've ever been in therapy and I can tell somebody's got me on step 2 and moving to step 3, it's like I'm dying.
Yeah. Let me just say, Rick, I echo that wholeheartedly. Although there's a skill set, right? There's no doubt about it. There's a skill set in practicing that. If we lose the purpose and the theory of that, which is let's quit. I tell people, quit letting your feelings drag you around by their nose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Quit. Let's use true thinking. Let's use critical thinking. And let's learn behaviorally to follow the truth. Yeah. And if we can keep people focused on that, so that they can apply that in their life. Otherwise, they say, I don't know how this fits into my workbook scenario.
Here's my workbook. You're on page 15.
I get these questions, and I keep saying, okay, let's talk about your feelings. Who's leading here? I'm following my feelings. Well, what's the truth? What's your thinking? So that I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's like education or any other profession. If we become technicians, we've lost the art of our practice. And so we can't, I'm with you 100%. I think we've got to teach counselors how to use CBT and other tools. I mean, at heart, I'm a developmentalist, child development. That's my undergraduate background. So my first step is to look at, you're in a 40s crisis, right? You're in generativity or whatever, but that can be technical or it can be revelation.
Yeah, if you look at somebody as a whole bunch of CBT charts that are flowing downward or something, it sort of gets crazy.
Yeah.
So, what we tell people here just generally is this is not about your feeling better.
Mm-hmm.
Because people are telling us about their presenting problem. The counseling is about exploring this issue and your life and learning better how to face that.
Amen. Right.
And eventually your feelings will change.
Yeah.
But that me making you feel better or telling you something that's going to make you feel better could be an absolute disaster. And I think sometimes people take the CBT cookbook to say, this is how I'm going to make you feel better.
Yeah. You get the question all the time, when are my feelings going to change? I'm like, I don't know, but keep acting on the truth.
Well, oftentimes, and this doesn't happen all the time, as you know, but I have people who come here and say, man, after that session, I felt worse. Yeah. And then I gently and very supportively tell them, like, your sessions are not about you making you feel better at the end.
Yeah.
It's about you becoming a more functional person and you being able to deal with your emotions better. And these emotions are indicators of something that is deep down that you need to work out. And if we're just looking at that for the first time and getting in touch with that, there's a lot of serious emotions there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's just going to lead to that. Now, so if I could tie all this in, I don't know how much you want to talk about this, but
it's up to you.
And it seems like
I'm following your lead.
Every podcast now for the last couple, I've talked about gender reassignment.
Okay, so it's up to you if you want to do it. I would be.
And I don't know. I can see that you have some stuff, but the cookbook approach becomes that. So I have this clip here. If I can get to play now, we're gonna.
Sure.
We're going to try this out. This is the first episode we're having this.
Good. Folks, so I get to be an experiment. So what you guys are saying, I'm up for that.
Let's see if it works. And for the folks, if it doesn't, we'll just tell you about it. But this clip is from Gender Transformation. And this was from the Epic Times, a documentary. And this is a dramatic depiction of an actual person and what they had experienced. And go ahead, let's play that clip if we can.
So, has anyone else met any resistance when you started your transition journeys?
Yeah. Mr. Robinson has been discouraging to both me and Joshua, saying that like this is just a phase.
Yeah, this is a case of conversion therapy. What he's doing is actually illegal.
And like he's refused to call us by our pronouns or ask other students about their pronouns.
This is not the first complaint regarding Mr. Robinson. I'll bring it up at the school board. I'll remember this, to ask for someone's pronouns is the most basic way to show respect.
It's our fundamental human rights.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
If I were to explore with a person about why they believe they're in the wrong body, that would be considered conversion therapy. My license would now be under threat. And that's also one of the reasons why this is really scary. These lawmakers are stopping people like me to be able to do my job properly.
One of the teachers' unions said, if you're a teacher and you don't affirm a child's gender identity, if you're not going to go along with the pronouns and make sure that child feels accepted for their new chosen gender, or maybe they're changing gender throughout the year because these kids too sometimes flip-flop on what they're wanting to be, you are damaging the child.
I'm Kat. I'm a musician and molecular biologist. For about 4 to 5 months, I was taking testosterone to attempt to transition from female to male. I think having both college professors and my peers validate my belief that I could be a man in a female body, I think it did push me over the edge to transition. Well, now if I do this, it's normalized, it's accepted.
Covalent bonds, which atoms share one or more electrons, and ionic bonds, in which an atom donates.
This is so boring. Can I borrow your phone? No, Evie, we have a test on this next week. Chill and stop calling me Evie. I go by Evan now.
Oh, so it's Eva now. So what are your preferred pronouns?
He, him.
So everybody, let's start call Evan by his new pronouns. Yes, Billy.
My preferred pronouns are actually hot and sexy. If you don't agree, you're canceled.
Billy, for real.
Hello, I'm David Collins with Christian Counseling Associates, in particular the Foundation for Christian Counseling. I'm also a licensed professional counselor. Just talk to you a minute about what the foundation does and what we can provide. You know, we strengthen the local communities, the families. We create this foundation. We do that through supporting marriages and marriage tune-up. We do that through supporting individuals in parenting and Christian active parenting. We also are community support, and obviously each of those people are located in the community, and so we seek to connect those folks with our partner churches. We really engage with helping people in those times, in those floods of their life where they're in crisis. And that crisis, we help to point them, we help to shine a light towards the foundation, the rock that is Christ. We really seek and aim to meet those people in crisis, to let them know that we care, that there's a way forward, that we can keep things accessible as far as support and help through the particular foundation grants that we offer. And that is just a bit about the vision and the mission that Foundation for Christian Counseling is after. Your giving transforms communities one family at a time.
And that goes on and on between the people who are being dramatized there are real people, and then it intersperses with a social worker, a psychiatrist, who are saying, and a lawyer, who are leading up advocacy groups. And we've been in touch with some of these advocacy groups.
Right.
There's just a whole bunch of people out there who are getting hurt.
Yeah.
And what happens is there's in these stories that are being presented just horrendous outcomes.
Yeah.
And the person who made the documentary is from Sweden. And so I watched another segment on him, like, why'd you make this? Well, he says, because in Sweden, we have to track the outcome of every procedure that we do.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so, you know, we don't have what you have, which is you have these psychological studies that support what people want to do. And they're very short term, and they're very in service of what people want to do. But we look at the long term. And the long term says that for these kids, if you would have just left them alone, they would have done significantly better than what is very seen now in Sweden is very risky, to give people hormones or to do gender reassignment surgery. We found that actually that gives 6-7 times the amount of suicide rate. So there's this this thing that's cited is that we need to do this in America because these kids are going to commit suicide. And this lawyer was on there. It's not in the clip, but she said, we found it astounding that these therapists were saying to these parents all across the country, because we talked to hundreds of families on the other side of this horrendous outcome, that people are saying doesn't exist. Yeah. And the therapist was saying, would you rather have a dead daughter or an alive son? And they were just asking the question, why are these therapists saying the exact same thing?
Yeah.
And, you know, I got to the CBT thing that most of these therapists are like, well, that's page 3 in my manual on what to do. Right. And they laid this out. They said, okay, we this is what we're seeing happen, that you have a teenager who, you know, at whatever age, they go to school. The teacher automatically says, what is your pronouns? And here we're going to start calling you by your new name. They send them to a support group where the counselor, the guidance counselor usually, doesn't tell the parent, but then proceeds to say, this is who you really are. Right. And you should go get hormones and consider gender reassignment before the age of 18 because the state won't pay for it after the age of 18, at least the people they were interviewing in California. And once you introduce the hormones, like say for instance, if that person is depressed, which many people are looking at this saying, wow, these people are depressed. If you add hormones to that, it adds somatic pain.
Right.
And that spikes the depression, which would be just a very obvious reason that somebody would be pushed to suicide. And we could just barely say like, wow, we should investigate that because we could prevent people from committing suicide. But no, you're not allowed to do that because anybody now, and this is from the guidance counselor, anybody who disagrees, and you see this in the clip, if there's a teacher who discourages you or doesn't use your pronoun, they're not only wrong, they are practicing reparative therapy, conversion therapy, and it's illegal.
Right.
So all of a sudden, it's illegal to really try to find out what's going on with you.
I know the whole tragedy of this whole thing is that people are struggling with either identity issues, right, or even same-sex attraction, and they feel like they can't get help for it. They can't talk about that. They can't. I don't know if you've seen some of the new strategies with Christian therapists, but I'm sure you have. The reality is that, so in the church, we don't let people talk about that because it's a sin, right? If I'm same-sex attracted or if I'm struggling. And so, but there are a whole bunch of groups that are willing to talk about it. And unfortunately, as you said, they're giving the very, very wrong message. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is to create a platform for people to come and ask honest questions. And again, I think particularly same-sex attraction, what is the research now? Something like 25% of people experience that at some point in their life. Very few is it persistent.
Right.
But so if somebody experiences that as a Christian, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had clients walk in and say, I don't like this, that I'm experiencing this, but I want a Christian worldview to be able to think about how I walk my way through it,
Yeah. And it's a reality that people are trying to make that, for pastors illegal. So I was in Atlanta at this conference where we saw a presentation on reparative therapy, and the guy up front was saying, here are these pastors in Australia that have been jailed, and we should bring that here too. And I was just shocked, like, well, wait a second, we're talking about throwing people in jail for something that they say, and the fact that, because here at CCA, like, you get in trouble for deciding at the end of one session what's going on with a person. We have an assessment process that takes like 3 meetings because people are more complex than some label I'm going to stick on them. And we need to find out about their lives and explore that and then continue that. And even in that exploring, it starts to help.
Right.
And for many people, it's the first time anybody ever explored their issue. But you have this thing now in these cookbook approaches that the teacher, the guidance counselor, the support group, says anybody who disagrees with you, including your family, the church, don't talk to them. Don't rely on them. They're bad. And then we've had people in one session be referred to Planned Parenthood. And this is outlined here too, that Planned Parenthood is taken over for hormone and gender reassignment surgery.
Imagine that.
Can you believe it? So now there's
That's such a
there's
surprise.
a downtick in abortions. What's the next cottage industry for Planned Parenthood? And here it is.
Right. And what's so sad about this is we go back to our worldview questions, right? It's all driven by worldview. Why don't you admit it? It'd be one thing if somebody would say, I believe this, and I'm pushing this particular approach. I want you to know that when you walk in the door, that this is my belief system. But nobody's doing that. They're presenting all of this as facts, which is, as you said, and they're not only bad worldview pieces, but they're bad facts too. They're not strong facts. So I agree with you, Rich. I think this is a travesty. And you look at kids, and I don't know about you, but for the clients that I work with that struggle with a couple of these issues,
sure, it's all over the place.
They find such relief in being able to talk about it and to hear that there is truth.
Yeah,
they may not like it.
Counselors, at least just explore the issue with them. But in Christian counseling, there are important life truths, and to point people to that in a place where they struggle.
This is amazing, right? It's hope. I don't know about you, but I tell people oftentimes, they say, well, this is really amazing what you do. I said, really, all I did was help redefine hope for you,
Yeah.
And when people have that hope, and what better place to put that in, right? There's a God who cares about me, He understands these questions that I have. He understands this. He is the source of the answers for those. And again, that not to minimize the therapeutic process, which is really true, but that hope takes people into life, into real life, right?
Absolutely.
But
So, what more can I say about that?
We could probably talk hours about that, Rich, but I think, I guess I would, if we're summing it up, the one thing I'd like to say is, if you're struggling with something like that, get to somebody who understands the issues and who understands the Creator and who understands the worldview around it, so that when you explore that, you're exploring real truth, right? And real hope, and not just, I'm going to make myself feel better.
Yeah, and I figured out what I wanted to say. There's this poll out there that 70%, it's a leading poll. It's like a Harris, Quinnipiac, or whatever. The poll that they're citing now is that 69% of adults are against children under the age of 18 having hormones or reassignment surgery. And so it's a majority. And you think about all the things that you can't do before the age of 21 or 16 or 18, and we would let a 14-year-old without the consent of a parent. And then, so without the consent of a parent, hormones and reassignment, the polls are even higher that people disagree with it. Absolutely. Regardless of what they think otherwise. And I think of, as a parent, if I found out that the school or the counselor had my kid in treatment without telling me and were medicating, I would just, my head would explode.
Yeah. I talked to somebody the other day who said, what? They can be on my insurance until they're 26, but I can't get their records. So we're backwards. We're backwards in terms of how we are handling this stuff. And so I agree with you, Rich. I think it's good. And I'm sorry, this is probably dangerous having us in the same room together, but, but I was thinking, do you remember us sitting in front of that legislative committee, or it wasn't a committee, it was a executive director of the committee. Yeah. And he said, this is never going to happen in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. They're like, there's nothing to worry about. Nothing.
And then the recent decisions come out, it's illegal to practice conversion therapy in Pennsylvania. And so anything that they can hang on conversion therapy, I feel like in some ways I risk my license in areas where we go into this with a biblical model. And again, we're not doing, because we all know the conversion therapy is not an accepted practice and it's not a healthy practice. Right. But the reality is
I would risk saying there's nobody in this state who's doing conversion therapy.
Absolutely. I think that's
which is the definition of it is we're going to make you straight.
Yep.
Is there 60, upwards of 70% of parents saying, I don't want this under the age of 18? Absolutely. And that's what they're trying to label now as conversion therapy. Like, you disagree with it. Well, guess what? According to the latest polls, most people do, because making a decision that will alter your body for your life and giving them untested treatments that could alter your body for your life, you should be just, at least, let's say, you should be of full mind as an adult.
Why don't we at least have a fully developed frontal cortex before we do that, right?
Yeah, like we don't give alcohol to kids, so, and we don't allow them to get tattoos. We don't allow them to drive to a certain age. We won't send them to war, all these kinds of things. Let them vote, but we'll let them do this.
I agree, and Rich, that kind of dovetails into things like they're going on education and child care and other places where we're talking about, child-centered, practice. Yeah. And again, I'm a developmental, so I'm one of the original guys that said, hey, we gotta really think about what's going on in kids and not just be everything from the top down from parents. I mean, child-centered is an appropriate tool, but it's not appropriate when you start to say whatever a kid feels at 2 is what we should follow. That's not appropriate. So we see that in toilet training. We talked a little bit about this before. In our preschool program, in our childcare, we're seeing toilet training being delayed years since the pandemic. Because now what people are saying is, my child's not ready. Well, it is true that toilet training and mental health issues like this are some things that kids do control. You can't make somebody go to the bathroom, but the fact that you say, well, we're going to let you decide when you do that, is a very different story than saying we're going to provide some guidelines and within to work with you. So I think we're seeing that in the pediatric communities where that's starting to creep in, education, childcare. And so worldview matters. Again, that's probably not our theme today, but it
absolutely.
Seems to be
well, if this was something, whether I was a Christian or not, if this was happening to my family in a public school, and I would encourage people to watch that gender transformation documentary from the Epic Times. But if I was a parent who had the whole school against me, or the government worse, I would just be like, let's get out of here. Mm-hmm. And so you can find in Christian schools traditional values, mm-hmm. and people who are going to seek out the truth about things, and letting your kid be a kid.
Yeah.
Besides all the other things that come along with Christian education. So, really always been glad that you're doing that kind of work on a larger scale. And definitely the stuff that we did at the Capitol now, which was so many years ago, but we met with senators and congressmen on a state level and talked about these issues that we saw coming up on the horizon, and they would say, oh, don't worry about it.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Right. So it's huge. And again, I don't know where you want to go with that particular component, but
I think we could talk about whatever else you want to talk about. But I wanted to make that point.
Well, it's a great point, because that's what's happening, particularly in the church. We're seeing Christians, particularly evangelicals, that said, well, being in politics is of the devil. It's worldly, it's secular. And I don't know if you experienced this from your perspective, but last time I was at the Capitol, the number of Christians that have sought office and are in office and that are gathering to pray. I mean, and here's what they're saying to us is things like this. Hey, Merle, we took a political risk supporting this particular faith-based initiative, to protect your religious rights, to protect a counselor. And you know what? I didn't hear one thank you from any of your folks out there. That's a really difficult thing to say. I mean, here I am, I'm on the front, I'm Moses up here, and nobody can hold my hands up, and so my passion for people as Christians is to think about being involved in politics is a part of being in a democracy. Now, again, it's different in China, it's different in other places, but in America, our country was founded on the idea that faith, was going to impact the decisions that we made. And so we're encouraging. So let me give you some good news and some, maybe this will be, you might have to cut this out of the session if it doesn't.
Sure, no, go for it.
It's, we're in the budget season in Harrisburg. And so understanding what I think I understand, which is a little bit risky to say, but the final budget's in the final hands now. That all the negotiating is done. And we're going to see in Pennsylvania some things that are really going to help parents in terms of their choices. We're at the Educational Improvement Tax Credit Program, which is where individuals and businesses can donate their state sales tax or state tax liability to scholarship organizations to help families be able to afford Christian schools.
Okay, so what does that mean for somebody who doesn't pay their taxes with themselves? They get an accountant or something.
It should be something we should be talking about, because if you're interested, 90% you get 90% credit for any of your state tax liability, personally or corporately, and that money, the state has said, look, take that money. We're gonna give you 90% of it, or 90% tax credit, if you give it to a scholarship organization. So we're going to see another big increase in that this year. We're not sure the numbers yet, but that's helping like organizations like ours. Now we serve our population at Champion reflects the local community. We give about 95% of our people get financial aid. So I don't want to talk about that, but what I want to say is that helps organizations be able to extend help to families that can't afford private education. But the other thing we're going to see is I think we're going to see what we call lifeline scholarships for the first time in our state. I'm going to use the dirty language on your word. It's called a voucher, and then politically that's a bad word. It's really I may have lost any political clout that I have in Harrisburg by saying that. But what we're going to see is we're thinking up to $100 million that's going to go to the population you talked about, the disadvantaged people that are in failing school systems, low income families, and they're going to be able to get most of their tuition paid to be able to choose a private school in the Commonwealth. So
that's a huge change.
This is big. This is and I got to give kudos, Governor Shapiro, who stands against faith-based things on some levels, was one of the big pushes. This wouldn't have happened without him being behind this. And he ran on. He made a mention. He's the first Democratic governor in the country during election season to say, I support this kind of a program. So this will change the landscape for many, many families. So don't want to go into that. But now, if that, you guys, technical guys, you're going to have to cut this out if it doesn't
No,
come
you've,
through.
you've heard it here first, folks, that school vouchers in Pennsylvania, it's coming.
So
according to Merle Skinner.
it should be. So we'll see how many responses you get to that one. So, but again, the idea that parents can choose, and and
why not?
That's amazing.
Why not?
Now,
every public school teacher out there is
well,
falling off their seat.
What's really interesting is when I'm reviewing, there's a lot of public school teachers that realize, because here's what happens research-wise. Again, I know we're not about school choice in this conversation, but what happens is public schools improve. Because many times it's families who say that my child doesn't quite fit, like in our case, we do a lot of work with ADHD kids on the spectrum, because we have an understanding of that. Now our school's not filled with those kids, but I mean, we can accommodate some of those needs and are helping other schools learn how to do that. Partially because of the mental health background, of course. But so a family says, I'm going to get the kind of, I can do that in a smaller classroom. I can do that. So there's let me just say on the flip side of this, the wild west around the country of what's going on, because we went from a very rigid system, education, like change couldn't happen, even to the number of hours and number of days you had to sit in a classroom to be able to get credit in the old Carnegie system units. But to now it's like thrown wide open. And people can do anything. We have this huge increase in cyber school, this huge increase in
So you're referring to like why you can get a master's in 3 weeks.
Yeah, exactly right. I'm referring to,
online.
And let me just share it. So I sit with a high school family, and a student says, Mom, why would I go here all day to school when I can go to school for 2 or 3 hours and have the rest of the day do whatever I want to do?
Yeah.
And I look at now that, in fairness, that's not true of all cyber schools. It's not true of all places. But I look at the mom and say, that might be true. What do you want? And she says, whatever he wants. So we're back to this child-centered decision-making, child-centered.
And I'm sure that people heard about this. We had somebody here one time that he had trouble waking up because he said, for 4 years, and we didn't know this until we talked to him about it, of course. Didn't think to ask because this would have never happened. Right. But I woke up every morning in cyber school, and I turned on my computer, marked that I was present, and then I went back to sleep.
Right.
And that was it.
I mean, it's so what we're seeing, again, I'm going to make it clear that I teach a dual credit course with Colorado Christian University to multiple high school students around intro to Christian psychology, and also a marriage and family class for juniors and seniors. So I'm not opposed to online classrooms and learning. It's just if it's not done well, or if it can't be done well because a student can't do it well, which we know from research pre-pandemic, only about 10% of kids could really do cyber school full-time well. Now, what we saw in the pandemic was this learning loss thing that happened. And partially was about online learning not being ready and not being done well, but it was partially done with this whole shift to we can't control, we can't structure and those kinds of things. And so we're trying to fiddle with that. But we on average, kids, I believe the number was about on average 5 months learning loss across the country.
Yeah. Well, you're an educational expert.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I'll say I'm in education.
Fair. But let's see what you think about this. That I would take this back to church. Because to me, it's the view. Everything can be done online.
Yeah.
So I could do school. I can do church. And so I have pastors who are like, hey, if you're on your couch this morning. And I remember during the pandemic of just being in my pajamas because I was told that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, don't go out to church. and just sitting there with a cup of coffee being like, you know what? I don't even know what's going on here.
Yeah.
And in our case, it was pre-recorded YouTube. And that's still going on. What do you think about that? I mean,
Well,
is it church? Can you benefit from that? Or is there a component that is very useful to being on site?
My perspective is the answer is yes and no. I mean, and it's very complex, but they're huge useful tools for being online. I mean, and look, again, the extreme situation, what about shut-ins? Well, there's a way for them to connect, right? They can't possibly be on. Is it true that antisocial people will become more antisocial if they sit on their couch all the time? And I believe that's true. One of the biggest problems I have with when we're talking about social goals for people is the people that argue that they can be just as social online when they're in public can't be social. And so there are skill sets involved. But yeah, I grew up in the televangelist era, right? I got some great teaching as a kid, a little older.
What televangelist did you like?
Well, I like Pat Robertson. I like Pat. Pat, maybe one of the things I'm trying to learn.
He just passed away.
He did, yeah. He's a tremendous man. He probably is a guy that we can all learn from about many things. One of them is
he was Regent University founder.
Think about that establishment. Jerry Falwell, those guys. There's lots of
Jerry Falwell was big. Lots
of great guys. Did they have their faults? Yes. And did some of them fall? Yes. But I benefited tremendously from that. I don't believe at the exclusion of church, right? And so community is community, and I do believe that there is a physical connection in community that's really important.
Yeah, I sort of see all this backfiring though. Yeah. So if you've seen ChatGPT,
yes.
So
we just did it. We just did a training on it.
I can type in the ChatGPT school teachers who like online.
Yeah.
Please give me a curriculum for science, taxonomy, and a 12-lesson plan, and narrate it, please. And a person that looks like a teacher. And that person will be on the screen, and it will interact with you. And it will give you everything that you could put into an online platform. And so my question becomes why do I need these teachers anymore?
Right. Well, and that's where we go back to the art of teaching, right? Or the art of therapy. The reality is it's discernment, right?
I think the online platforms are going to have a hard time because we have the asynchronous, which is predominantly now. I didn't know this, for counseling education, that you had counselors out there who were getting trained in an asynchronous environment. If people don't know what I'm talking about, because it took me a while to learn that term.
It's an important concept. Yeah.
That it's just it's a platform with information. Do this, read this, put this answer down, and then somebody sometime later is answering you back.
Right.
And you can get your degree that way. And we'll see you on site for a 1 week intensive every semester. And when you get out of here, we'll have had you in an actual classroom with a master's degree for about 4 weeks total. Yeah. And we've found people, candidates who didn't get hired here, who've never read a book, and said, and I've asked them well, what were you going to do? Well, I can get it off the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
and some of the professors are just, they're waking up out of bed, clicking it, saying approved. And, so I guess what I would say is that you lose this whole in-person thing that there's this dynamic, and maybe the justification in college, say for instance, was more difficult. But like when you don't know what you're doing in a social situation, that can be blaring.
Absolutely, and you can't learn that online. There is an online social activity that that's appropriate. It's not inappropriate, but it doesn't replace in person and fellowship is defined, and as we think about it from a Christian worldview, we start to think about, being present with people.
Yeah.
So again,
and the church thing too. Like my daughter was on her way to somewhere with her friends, and we always say church on Sunday, and the argument was, well, we can do this. We can be on our way. We'll listen to church on the car.
Yeah.
And she was like, no. I was really proud of her, because. Yeah, you can't drive a car and do church.
Yeah,
you really can't do church in a car, can you? Really. Because if I'm sleeping in church, somebody knows it, and that's a representation that God knows it.
Yeah.
And so, but it's easy for me. Like if I tell you what I'd like to do, is like I'd like it easy sometime.
Yeah. Agreed.
Is that the good life though?
It's hard, and I don't know about you, but I travel a good bit. So like I'm in and out of our church because of being away and things, and it does affect my relationships with people. I mean, even though again I'm friendly, I have great relationships, known people for a long time, I have to pick up, and and so all of that I think is really important. One of the things we did in the pandemic as an organization was we were able to stay open. As soon as we were, partially because we had childcare, partially because of our community focus.
Yeah, we stayed up too.
Yeah, and so we did because we wanted to be a place where people could run to, not away from.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the definition here. If you're running away, it's probably not a social activity. You're probably not being social when you're running away. Now that doesn't mean we all know about boundaries and being not doing things that aren't healthy for us and all that kind of stuff. But
now I'm aware that like people are listening to this, and there's some people out there who are just enraged.
Yep, probably. In fact, you lost half your listening audience.
What are you saying? I'm running away if I go online.
Yeah.
So there's some. We just asked to reflect on the nature of social connection, real relationships.
Right.
And that technology is awesome,
right?
And can do a lot of things, but can it replace that?
I agree with that, Rich. And so again, to be clear, I'm not opposed to any of those things. I think they need to be just like when we do sociograms with people, right? You can only have so many people in close, and then there's very appropriate. Like the further out you get. We wouldn't encourage people to be married and never see each other, right?
Right. Like, could you just hey, why don't you meet online?
Yeah, we're going to just exist fully. Most people would not be happy with that, I would think. But the reality is that, but there are places where online and things can really augment and.
Yeah, if I'm on a 5-year spaceship, to Mars or something,
right.
It'd be a way to keep a connection.
Right. When I think about my psych class, again, there are kids that wouldn't be able to take a higher level psych class like that from a practitioner. It's different to take a psych class from a book that somebody knows about psychology, to say somebody who's an LPC who can say, this is how this really plays out in real life. That's a great tool. But again, I wouldn't want to do everything that way. So.
Yeah. Well, amazing. So school vouchers are coming. That was a big announcement. What else? When it pertains to mental health in schools. Yeah. Christian schools, developmental issues like that. What else is on your mind?
Everything. Rich, I hate to say it. So we went through, you guys all know, we went through the pandemic, which is our first crisis. Then we went through the mental health crisis, right?
Yeah.
Well, we haven't gone through the mental health. We're in the mental health crisis, right?
We're in the middle of it.
And we're still in the education pandemic crisis. Now we have learning loss to deal with. And so I'll frame this and maybe go into some of the details, but we've got this whole education crisis that's going on. So now that we can do many things, one of the most shocking things is, and we believe, I think, and you would believe this too, that parents are the best decision makers for their kids, right?
Yes.
And we would want that to be true. And I believe that, and that's one of the reasons I stand at the Capitol and say, give parents more choices.
Yeah.
But one of the things we haven't done is teach people how to make healthy choices for their families. Right? So now we've all of a sudden taken them from, you have no choices unless you're rich, or you're willing to sacrifice tons, to now finances. Finances are still part of it, but for many kids, it's going to be, you can go choose a school here if you live in this, for the Lifeline scholarships.
Yeah.
So how does a parent decide? Is that the best school? Is that the best place for me? Is this the best decision for me? Or what about cyber school? What about homeschooling? And so now we're in that crisis, particularly as a Christian community, because we've been, like we typically are as Christians, forgive me, body of Christ, but we're reactionary, right?
Sure.
We want vouchers because we want to run from public education, not because we want to run to something, right?
Yeah.
So helping parents now really rethink about what's good for their kids and what's healthy. So we see this all the time. We've seen families who come in and say, we've lost a year. We couldn't navigate this. We made a choice that seemed to be a good choice for us, but wasn't. Whatever that choice can be. And that can be any of the above scenarios. And so now our work is to really help people really think through, again, not emotionally, although emotions are a part of it, but from facts, from research. So I think we are in a crisis education-wise. In some places, we're seeing Christian schools grow like crazy. That's typically in affluent areas where families can make the choice. Sometimes we're seeing private schools grow. We're seeing other kind of things happen. Mm-hmm. But what we're also seeing is this mental health crisis is playing out in kids, and schools are many schools are finding it difficult to deal with that. So I don't know what you're experiencing too, because I don't think the statistics on ADHD have changed, but we're seeing that play out in kids' lives, and particularly undiagnosed kids, kids that are not officially diagnosed, and young adults, particularly men, coming in depressed. And we start to realize, and we start working our way back there and say, well, have you ever thought about ADHD? No. So all of that crisis is going on, along with anxiety, depression, spectrum, kind of issues. And how do we do appropriate diagnosis with autistic spectrum disorder, particularly high functioning kids who parents would rather not. So that schools have to do this. I mean, or they have to cherry pick, which is, it's just a misnomer. It's not true. Most schools don't do that. But say we're not going to take anybody who has any special needs, or anybody who doesn't, or struggles with learning loss, or anybody, which is not realistic. And I'm sorry, Rich, I'm talking too much here. I'll let you get more in. But the Association of Christian Schools International, who I do a lot of work for, who is the largest Christian school association in the world, has done some flourishing schools researches, and we're now finding that one of the best predictors of high school spirituality, kids who graduate from Christian high schools, the more mature Christians are kids who come from schools where special needs are assimilated and integrated in the program. Okay. Now that kind of makes sense after the fact, but nobody would say that. Hey, I'm gonna go to send my child to a high school where they have special needs kids, and because I want them to grow spiritually. But if you start thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense. How I learned to think about others, how I learned to recognize the gifts that God has given me, those kind of things. So this idea that the church should be running towards these crises is my passion, although it's very, very hard and very difficult because these people are hurting, right? Families are hurting.
So churches should deal with special needs families better than they do, things like that, and we shouldn't shy away from schools that are going to incorporate special needs into the life.
No, in fact, quite the opposite. For kids, schools have to do that well. That's a whole learning skill set, just like everything else. Okay. But for schools that can do that, we're seeing amazing results in the lives of all the kids. Okay, so it's pretty interesting data when you start to look at it, and so all of that is new thoughts for us, right?
I think that's one of the things I've noticed with the families that I work with in the church, that that's changed a lot since I've been a kid. I grew up. I have a half brother who's profoundly retarded, so there's a mental age maybe like a 2-year-old. And that spent a lot of time. He'd sleep in my room, and not a lot of people know about that. I don't talk a lot about it, but just remember a lot about him. He's still alive today. He's in a care home, and that is something that. Families, they have a lot to face.
Rich, that touches my heart. That brings a huge memory. I accepted the Lord when I was 8, and I remember working with a pastor, and my parents were like, "Does he really know what he's doing?" And I did. Now I made lots of mistakes. For all of you who know that out there, so I mean, I've been on a journey like all of us. But I can remember at that young age, there was a profoundly retarded Down syndrome boy in our church. Yeah. And I remember pushing him down. I can't remember why. Some kind of frustration over something, what. And to this day, like I think about, nobody was there to help me process. I mean, I was bad. You know what I'm saying? It was bad. But that kind of an impact, like there was no understanding of that. There was no conversation about that. I don't even know what the real issues were. But those kind of things are really impactful in our lives, right?
Yeah.
And learning how to figure out God's creation and his understanding of those kind of things, and are amazing conversations for people to have.
Yeah. As I remember that more, my stepfather, who, this was from a child from a previous marriage, but he only talked with me about it one time, and he told me the day, that his son Chris had a seizure, and how they realized that had destroyed his mental capacity. Wow. And you could just see in the way that he described that just that one time, that it completely had wrecked him emotionally, wrecked the marriage.
Yeah.
And affected him the rest of his life. I don't think he ever really dealt with it. And So I just understanding those things, and for me, like, I always thought about, like, wow, I wonder if we could do anything for Chris. It would be great to hear him talk, and to have him be more functional. They taught him how to do some sign language, and stuff like that. But it was just, to me, sometimes very frustrating. I think about the autism. Yeah. First thing I would say, like what eventually gets me into counseling, after I wasn't going to be a biologist or kind of
after you discovered biology wasn't for me.
Right, that didn't work out, folks. Sorry. Was those things put a compassion in me about people, and even in impossible situations. And I got this thing, like, I'm not going to give up on Chris. I'm not going to give up on these people. And I find that now, like with the schools doing integration, I've seen a whole bunch of kids who have that kind of kindness and attitude about it. Where I probably wouldn't have had that back then. And
what a gift, huh? I mean, I'm sure you weren't calculating this as the number of gifts when you were getting them, right? So, but what a gift!
It didn't feel good. Yeah. It was like, like I remember a couple of times, like we went to Kennywood, we were taking Chris with us, and I was like, oh man, like. And it would be taking care of him, taking him along, and I would be involved in that sometimes. Now to be fair, I had very little to do with Chris, is the way that the family worked it out. But, that sets me up later. Like I worked with profoundly autistic kids.
Oh, wow.
Like early in my career. And
tough work.
I've had these jobs, and not to compare, like the other memory I get is that I was working in this kitchen. Like early on as a teenager, I had jobs in kitchens, and I remember routinely going in, and the pots would literally be stacked up to the ceiling of caked on stuff, that you would just have to scrub, like each pot a half hour. And I remember also seeing people would come in, look at it, and quit.
Yeah.
And those kind of things, in my life, I find that to this day. Like when it comes time to be a professional counselor, and they really understand what it's about, they're like, man, I don't want to do this.
And this is way too hard.
Right, like this
doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good. Like it doesn't. I thought this was going to be like me talking to people, and we were both going to leave with hands up in the air, and profound things happen in each one of these jobs. I loved, say for instance, working with autistic children, but what was really frustrating is that some of them would never recover their abilities. And then you were like, well, then what?
Yeah.
And to this day, I still have that a passion about, like, wow, we should figure something out here, and I never, to me, autism seems like it's in the same place that it was 20 years ago.
Yeah. I think in some ways, Rich, particularly the higher functioning, we've learned so much. Like some of the work that we do with diagnosis, I mean, I agree with you. The profound piece is really, really difficult. It's so, stress, challenge, right? But what I'm kind of excited about is we're now understanding some of the higher functioning pieces where people are coming in and saying, I don't get why I'm like this. And we start to be able to define that and say, you can actually, this is neurological. And so we can actually work on this. You can actually learn how to trust people. You can actually learn how to, when my wife says to do this and say hi to them, I'm going to just do it. I don't understand why, but she told me to do it. And I'm, those kinds of skill sets that I find very encouraging for families, instead of beating themselves up about why isn't this happening. So I'm not challenging what you're saying. I agree with it.
And to be precise, because I know that matters to a whole bunch of parents, as it's their lives with the kids growing up. That we found that if you intervened it early, and then that basically, though, even into adulthood, the brain was pliable, and that if you trained hard enough, that things would spontaneously occur, even down to the social, and that we saw kids recover pretty much. From autism, like, they're in a classroom, nobody knew that they ever had a problem. And then, the research was saying at that time it was about, 40 to 50% would reach full recovery, and then the rest of the 50% would have some kind of variable outcome.
And saying to those people, you may be dealing with this the rest of your life, but you can deal with it.
Yeah, so I haven't heard of any research that's come out, because I would see it celebrated from the rooftops.
Yeah.
That statistic has been moved.
No, I don't think so. I think we're learning to intervene better. I think we're learning to identify, and we're learning to accept better. I think that's one of the things that, particularly at the early childhood level, we're starting to begin to be able to say it's okay that you did this diagnosis. Now, again, when it's profound, it's very difficult. But the higher functioning kids, and starting to say, you can learn social skills. Yes, we're gonna. There's actually a couple. I don't know if you've seen them, but there's actually a couple books that are like, read this in this social situation and learn it. Kind of thing. So it's somewhat behavioral, but based on the brain research, trying to retrain the brain. So that stuff is really interesting.
I love that stuff.
But it's hard. I just wanted to echo what you said. One of the reasons we started the center was for the same reason. It's just like this doesn't have to be this way. And wow, that's amazing. We talk about it as a staff all the time. In fact, guess what we spent our last half of the semester's Bible study on for all of our staff was burnout. So we're working through and we're looking at each other saying, yeah, what we do is very difficult. And we're on this burnout scale. We got to be really careful because it's very hard. But I don't know about you, but I feel like what we do and what you do, we're seeing all this current stuff that people are talking about, saying they wish they had some impact in. We're getting to do it every day, right? Sometimes it's not so great. Sometimes it doesn't turn out well. But many times it's like we have a chance to make some changes here. So I just want to encourage you, Rich, because I think places like you, hopefully places like us, we have the opportunity to really, really make a difference. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And same goes for you. I've always enjoyed our time together and wish that we could find more excuses to collaborate. Yeah. And so we have the American Association of Christian Counselors, AACC conference coming up in September. Yeah. What's been going on there for you? We never got to do another presentation together, but
we didn't. I'd love for them to follow that up. Although I hear some rumblings about being more involved politically. So,
Christian Counseling Associates is ready to serve you, providing a wide range of counseling services. Christian counseling is accessible to everyone. We serve both Christians who want their faith integrated into the counseling process, or those holding any beliefs or attitudes toward spirituality. With many years of counseling experience, our counselors are professional, licensed, highly trained, and rooted in their commitment to their church and communities. CCA is able to provide a full range of clinical counseling services. For more information, visit our website at www.ccawpa.com.
So the AACC is offering a mental health first responders class. Their goal is to train, I forget how many thousand first responders, so that the church can respond to mental health and not just throw their hands up. Now, as therapists,
so you can get online at the aacc.net, and you can get this course online. It'll end in a certificate.
Yep.
And if you're a church out there, you can order this streaming content.
Right.
And you can bring it up for your folks sitting in a room like this. They get great training.
Absolutely.
And then they're going to enhance their ability to be the first stop for people who are struggling.
So, Rich, we've sent many of our staff to that. There are, like for example,
just so we get the title again, it's mental health first
responders class.
Mental health first responders course.
I believe, okay. Yeah. So AACC can.
We want every church to buy this.
Yes, absolutely, and they've extended this often. But the cool thing about it is people come out of those courses and they're like, hey, I now know what to do if somebody says that they're thinking about hurting themselves. They don't just throw their hands up and say, oh, get to a counselor, not that they shouldn't get to a counselor or hospital. that might be the perfect course, but they know how to triage that. They know what to do with somebody says they're feeling anxious. They don't say, well, that's a sin, stop. They say, wait a second, there's a biblical perspective on how we work through anxiety. And so they're not counselors, but they're first responders. And we've been encouraging, what we've actually done, Rich, is we've encouraged cohort groups to take this, and then I would meet with them maybe 2 or 3 times during a course and just answer questions and say,
awesome.
That's worked out really, really well.
Tim Clinton should make us the facilitators of and salespeople for it.
AACC, right?
We'll sell thousands.
Go AACC, right?
Yeah.
We should have wore our ACC membership tags today. Sorry.
Yeah, for any counselor listening out there or any church, the AACC is the best.
Yeah.
And we were trying to get them to do the Extraordinary Women's Conference.
Yes. How did that go?
Well, we're still working on it.
Okay.
So we've located a church. You need a big venue, and most of the churches in Western PA.
Yeah.
They're small family churches.
Yeah, I'm curious, what size venue do you need? Would 1,000 people work?
1,500 is what they wanted.
Our new facility is going to be a little bit smaller than that, but so
how many people?
We should be able to put 1,000 people in the facility. But it'll be interesting. We can, whether we can actually put 1,000 people in there, I don't know, but we physically will be able to for an event.
We had them looking at a church out in Canton, Ohio, that would meet that bill. But I still would love to get them to Western PA because we so much need those kind of events. And so not only is mental health first responders, but the events that they bring. And if you go to the conferences, I'd send any pastoral counselor there.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're just great.
They are, and for those of you who like to take your families, I mean, Barb goes with me all the time. We just have a lot of fun. And if you like popular speakers and
it's in Nashville every other year. It's in Dallas and then in Nashville, but they'll bring in every country star that you've ever seen. I'm like, I can't even believe it.
Yeah.
But we've learned to just fall in love with Nashville too in the process of going to this.
Absolutely. It's a great, so I'm with Rich. I encourage you, if you're doing any type of counseling at all and you're a Christian, or even if you're not, get there.
I would say to anybody.
This is the place to be, but real stuff too. Not just people preaching at you, but people. Jim Dobson was there. I don't know if you got to see him the one year. There was I think it was a private dinner, but he was there, and I was so touched because he shared that he had actually taken somebody for an abortion at one point, and he was sharing his regret over that, and it just broke my heart. But I thought about, not like, oh, poor Jim, but it was more like we were all struggling with these issues, and this was very early on in his career. Before he thought he was being supportive and helpful. Sure. And but that's the kind of reality that you get at these things, like people that are really talking about real issues, that are helping us train.
Yeah, I could say professionally, I've had many life-changing moments at those conferences, and I think Tim Clinton took over for James Dobson.
Yeah, I think I can't remember how that all worked out,
but so just whether it's like Henry Cloud or Daniel Amen or like all these people are there.
Look at the brochures, and it's just like who's who and Christian impact today, and you'll find many of them there.
So it's always been really helpful. But the mental health first responders we've really incorporated that into the DNA of CCA.
Yeah.
Because what we've found, and American Association of Christian Counselors will say this in their publications, that they feel that Christian counseling at its best is a modern form of discipleship.
Yep.
And so, we look at counseling as committing and learning about a life of transparency and accountability, and that God would use that environment, which happens in the church, as how we grow. And so if you see, what can happen when we learn that, that God speaks to us at the heart level, but we also have desire and things that make us feel good, and that we have to choose.
Yeah.
And if we do that alone, left up to our own devices, we have very many areas of weakness, but with other people around, we can be strengthened. And in those areas where we develop this way of consistently turning towards the Lord, trusting Him in His way, even though we don't feel like it, the whole world changes in the way that we see things and what can happen. And that's the power of God.
Absolutely, Rich. Let me just say, you guys do that really well, because I refer clients to you, and I hear
so much.
great good things about some of the things your therapists do and some of the specialties you have. So I would encourage you, if you're in a place where CCA exists, use them.
Everybody come to CCA. But
well, except for the people that are going to come to.
But you go to Merle's 2 up in Champion, PA, and so what I want So people moving from individual counseling, to we want them. We train them for group counseling, because that's the next step. Is people say, I just want my individual counselor for the rest of my life, and we see that as damaging. Like, we have all these people who don't want to go to the church because I got it right here, right. and this feels good. Over here, I don't get those kind of feelings. Yeah. At least not in the beginning. We want to train them to be back in life groups, growing again, and seeing that gives them the best chance to face anything in their lives, emotionally or otherwise. But what happens even before they get the counseling is that I've asked people, like, did you go to your church about this? And they say, no, I don't do that. Mm-hmm. But if they do and they bounce out of that, then they're not coming back. And they're going to some secular source that, who knows? Yeah. You want to talk about the wild, wild west. Oh my God. So we're experts in counseling. I could safely say that. And the things that go on in the secular mental health community, I'd need a series of podcasts. And we mention every once in a while, it's wild. Yeah. And it points you away from everything, of the heart and what's traditional. There's well-meaning counselors out there, mm-hmm. and people who want to help. But the industry has a set of values that many, many, many times is not helpful. It's exploitive. Mm-hmm. And so we want people to know that the first place that you go when you're struggling is the church. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that if these pastors took that, then after 4 sessions of first responding, you send them to a counselor, and mm-hmm. eventually they're coming back. Yep. That would be the goal. And we would want people to know that there's a whole bunch of stuff that's connected to our depression, anxiety, trauma, addiction, that wants to say to us, it'd feel better if you didn't do that. Mm-hmm. And and a lot of it is like, well, what do these other people have to do with me? I just want to make it about me, and that's what feels good when I'm talking about me. I love it. I love my counseling sessions. I just want to have them forever. And so,
hey, Rich, can I interrupt just a second?
Yeah.
I love that model, and that is truly, I believe, a biblical model. It's what's sad is so many pastors don't understand that. You know what I mean? And so education of pastors is really important too. One of the things I always do in my introduction to psych class, they have to interview their pastor and their view on Christian counseling. Wow. And many of them, these kids know a good bit about worldview and mental health, and they're very surprised. Their pastor says, well, no, I don't believe in counseling. I believe pastoral counseling is all there is. And so again, we're not trying to be controversial here, but to say that what we do is best as an integrated part of pastoral counseling and supportive of the church. It's not designed to take people away from the church. It's designed to push people back to the church and to Christian worldview. And so I believe if more pastors understood that, that team would be really, really much better focused on accomplishing. So
and so I think that the big challenges of our life, I'm pretty convinced of this, is to live in marriage, mm-hmm. either between a man and a woman in a lifetime commitment, or if you're single, to live in commitment to the church, mm-hmm. and then to actually live in a family, mm-hmm. and then to live in a spiritual family. And if you can do all those 3 things, man, you're a pretty strong person with a lot of resiliency.
Absolutely. Think about what your great-great-grandpappy would have said about that. He'd have said, if he'd have known you were going to say that, he'd probably say, what? What? So I wanted to introduce this topic, and it was about, so what is the good life? And this is pretty philosophical, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on this, because there's always room, to talk about some philosophical things. So I want to play this clip. And I'll set this up for us. Are you a Star Trek fan? I am a Star Trek fan.
Okay, so you remember Star Trek: The Next Generation was the show that I watched, especially in college. Like you got home from your classes, and it was on every day, and we would gather around the TV and be like, "What's gonna happen?" But then they got into the movies, mm-hmm. Next Generation movies, and remember the one about the Nexus. It was Star Trek Generations. And it had both Jean-Luc Picard and Captain Kirk.
Now it's starting to come back. Now, if my wife's not here, I've got to make sure she reminds me of these things. But
yeah, so you always wondered, like, wow, it would be really cool if this captain met this captain. We found out who was better.
Yeah,
and so that whole movie played on that.
Yeah,
it was my favorite. But within it, they were always asking the deeper questions. So this nexus is something that this evil character he's after. Mm-hmm. He'll destroy the universe to get into this nexus, and so the scene that we're going to see is Jean-Luc is chasing this evil guy and gets thrown into the nexus, and he finds Captain Kirk there. so let's play this.
I feel like I should hum the theme tune here or something, Rich.
Yeah, you want to. And for people who don't like Star Trek, you're automatically checked out. We'll bring you.
Come back in 3 minutes. Right? Yeah. Jump that 50 times.
I wanted to see him jump it. Yeah, can we have him? Is that even possible? Okay, so folks, it shows William Shatner on his horse, and he's jumping over this ravine where if he drops in, he can get killed. And then he jumps it. He looks back at it. He jumps it again, and now Jean-Luc Picard comes. Right. That was the best part, but that's.
I must have jumped that 50 times. Scared the hell out of me each time. Except this time. Because it isn't real.
Antonia.
She isn't real either, is she? Nothing here is. Nothing here matters. You know, maybe this isn't about an empty house. Maybe it's about that empty chair on the bridge of the Enterprise. Ever since I left Starfleet, I haven't made a difference. Captain of the Enterprise.
That's right.
Close to retirement?
I'm not planning on it.
Well, let me tell you something. Don't let them promote you. Don't let them transfer you. Don't let them do anything that takes you off the bridge of that ship, because while you're there, you can make a difference.
Come back with me. Help me stop Sauron. Make a difference again.
Who am I to argue with the captain of the Enterprise? What's the name of that planet? Viridian 3?
Yes.
I take it the odds are against us and the situation is grim.
You could say that.
You know, if Spock were here, he'd say that I was an irrational, illogical human being for taking on a mission like that. Sounds like fun.
I am so surprised you love that, Rich. What a great clip.
One of my favorite moments in the movie, they ride out of the Nexus, and so the Nexus is the place where anything that you desire, you think it, and it's yours. And so this Sauron is this person that the captain's chasing, who just blew up like a whole bunch of people to get in there, and is I don't know, somehow going to destroy the universe inadvertently, but he doesn't care, because it's all about how he feels, and I think about that. We talked a lot about the cookbook approach, and this. Why would these two? It's great that one captain acknowledges the other. What more could you want in a movie, a Star Trek movie, especially? But why would they leave paradise?
Yeah.
And you get into so many parallels, like, that,
Oh, yeah.
Why would Jesus leave heaven? Why would we put our careers at risk? Why would we even face something tough if we didn't have to? Now, I think of schools, and the whole conversation around, hey, tell me how you feel, and we'll call you that, and then we'll make it happen,
right?
So you can feel good. And if you disagree with that, we'll blow you up.
Yeah. And then you won't feel good.
Right. Anybody who disagrees with this project. But then you have these moments. I think of some of the things that we're into nowadays where we could just look at it and like common sense should tell you like wow, we've been very critical of medical marijuana on the podcast, and in Greensburg there's almost more medical marijuana dispensaries than there are churches in Greensburg. And the parking lots are full now, and who would have guessed that we would just say, like, I can choose when I'm going to feel good and forget about everything else. And but I do remember to sort of pick on the schools a little bit. I one of my best friends from childhood, I went to his house one day, and I'm just going to hope that he doesn't watch this, but if he does, give me a call. We could talk. But he was laughing about it. I walked in his house, and we hung out there a lot. It was his parents' house, and he was on the refrigerator sleeping on a couch. And I'm like, hey, Keith, what is this? Because it was just like, why would you have this on your fridge? And he was like, oh, that's me at my job. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And the story went, he sat down and explained it to me. I've gotten a job at the school, the public school, that I'm part of the maintenance crew there, and it's a union job.
Yeah.
And I get done with my job that I've been given around 11 o'clock, and I can't leave. That's the rule.
Yeah.
But I also am not allowed to do anything more because that's somebody else's job.
Yeah.
And so like literally, Rich, like if I wash a window, I've stolen that job from somebody else. They don't care if I sleep, just as long as I don't do any further work and leave.
What a sad thing.
And I was thinking, like, there's things that you could do, but you can't do them anymore. And I never know, I never asked him what happened to that job. But when I ran into him 10 years later, he was not working there anymore. And so, it enters into, like, when we're going to face things. And so later on, I became enamored with this question, what is the good life?
Yeah.
And for our clients, I think that is often a question, like, what am I pursuing?
Yeah.
And it becomes part of, like, what am I depressed about? What am I anxious about? Why does this trauma stick with me? Or why am I caught up in an addiction? And, one of the big ideas in philosophy is what constitutes the best life, and there's 4 tenets. I can't remember. I'll present this to you, and then you can tell me if you remember the 4th. But the one the 3 that always stand out to me is one that life is not fate. Mm-hmm. So our lives are not just meant to happen a certain way. Even though, like, theologically, we could look at it like God knows what's going to happen, and understands that, and will never understand it. But that we have a choice. And so there's choices we need to make in life. That's the first tenet, to understand that life is not 100% fate. And I would say I agree with that.
Absolutely.
That you're going to have to make choices, and that God gives you choices. And if we understand the problem of sin, left up to our own devices, we would never make the right choice. But God, gives us the power, the grace to make good choices.
Kind of foundational in Genesis, huh?
Absolutely. So there's free will.
Yeah.
And, so we God wants us to choose the right thing and has made it possible for it to happen. So we can't boast that, I did the right thing. That's a big theological piece, but it's not all fate. It's not been completely determined. So that's number one. So the second part is the second tenet is hedonism. Well, now that I have a choice, I can choose everything that feels good. And I should, so if an employer, we go back to this is funny because I get to sleep and I make more money here than anybody else would ever think of paying me. and I think of things like, if you're watching what's going on in Pennsylvania, I got a release that they're going to double the minimum wage. Yeah. Is that a done deal?
I don't know, but I heard it's in the budget process, so we'll see.
Okay, so. And what we watch is that if they raise the minimum wage to $15, which is a $7.50 increase, the society will expect a $7.50 increase
Absolutely.
Across the board, and that there's many businesses that can't do that.
And the economics will drive that. It's not about what we choose; it's about the way economic law works.
But man, does it feel good to be told you're getting a $7.50 raise? I want it.
Yeah.
I want that raise, Yeah. But I know too that there's consequences to that. But what does that matter to me? If I can just feel good, and so that hedonism principle, is that the good life? Should we choose that? And and then there's this, there's the heroic life. And the point is that some people would say, I've had a great life, but maybe I'd like to be like Mother Teresa, or, and if you ask Mother Teresa, like, wow, you had a really great life, she says, I'm just being, who I was made to be. I'm not anybody special. You do the same thing if you were me. Yeah. And so the point brought up, like with philosophers, is that these people don't know that they're doing anything special. Right. And maybe, it's just the way that it is, but what is that heroic life really that you could pursue, that you could choose, and that is the third idea of the good life, which is a good life is a life of service and sacrifice. Yeah. And you could choose that, but it won't feel good.
It's countercultural, Rich.
You lose things in it.
I think you just lost some viewers right there. Click. No,
right. Like, and it goes down to like, what is education about? What are some of these life struggles about? Like things I have in my mind, and that there's a path that requires devotion, and you can choose it. There's no guarantees on it. You're not guaranteed to feel good. You're not guaranteed to succeed. Right. But this is being played out, and in this clip that we saw, I just this is the reason I think this attracts people is like I could live in a life where I make the jump every time. Yeah. That every time I reach out my hand, there's something in it. But it doesn't mean anything. Knowing that this is a for sure deal, like part of what makes things special is reaching for something that you think you can't attain, and then finding out that it came to be.
Right. Yeah. Well, and learning how to fail well is the only way to grow. Right. So yeah. I would argue too that it ultimately does feel good. It has a different kind of a good feeling. It's a satisfied and importance, a purpose-filled feeling that is what people are looking for. It's the reason retirees that were able to financially leave, work in the pandemic, are starting to come back now and say, wait a second, I can play golf, but playing golf every day, is not really, doesn't bring me pleasure and purpose. I still have something to give. So we're seeing that at the center. I don't know if you're seeing that, but we've had 2 or 3 employees who've changed careers completely because they said, I feel like God's calling me into ministry. I can do this over there. I want to do it. And are finding them extremely, it's sacrificial for them. When you're, but it is the kind of thing you're talking about. It's meaningful. It's very meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. So I use this as a recruiting, because, and I'll help you out maybe if it's.
So www.champion.org if you have any questions. Okay.
right. That I mean, there's plenty of school teachers out there that have all of. Man, this is really going to get me in trouble. Let me say it. You know, being a school teacher can be pretty lucrative versus being a Christian school teacher. Yes. And you know, but if you chose the Christian schools, and you know, we're going to keep that eye on the vouchers. If you're a parent, you know, maybe it seems like a for sure deal to send your kid to public school. And I would say, you know, maybe from some of the things you saw today, it's the wild, wild west for sure.
Yeah,
you know?
and it's being a part of the decision, quit defaulting to assumptions, and sometimes thinking. Think about what you're doing. Think about what matters, because sacrifice is sacrifice. I tell staff that come to work for us, for parents to make a decision, sacrifice is sacrifice. It's hard.
In researching out different places to go in my internship, I've been in a pastoral position for many years, and I have a lot of experience coming in, but not in the counseling profession. So coming here, I was able to integrate my faith and my biblical principles into the counseling practice in an environment that was very supportive and encouraging. I was able to use the techniques and the modalities that I learned in my counseling school as evidence-based practices and have the faith integrated into those. And that was so important to me because my faith informs how I live. So this was a necessity for me in my internship and in my future to be able to put that into my practice. In the internship process, it's a wonderful opportunity to grow and expand your knowledge and put into practice what you've learned. My experience has been wonderful. It's been a great, awesome experience. I feel supported. I feel encouraged. I feel that I'm given opportunities to grow further in my career and in my faith also, so that's very important too. I've had a great experience at Christian Counseling Associates. You can too. Come grow with us.
So if you're a teacher, if you're a parent, you know, in the wild, wild west, you know, if you're a counselor, there's plenty of like government jobs, like my friend Keith could get into, and I can tell you, like, what we learned from that is that sometimes the highest paying job isn't the best job, and it doesn't last because you can't do it. There's a reason they give you more money in it,
right?
You know, and for the client, you know, who can go to a counselor who's going to tell you what you feel like hearing. Or the church that you want to go to that's going to say what you always agree with. All these things that might feel good, you know, but is that what the good life is about? You know, and you can decide to build something. Yeah. You know, and so this voucher program, you know, there's a lot of teachers and parents who can now choose. That's what we'd hope for. I think that's what that announcement means. Huh?
We're hoping. What I'll do is it's an incremental step, you know, but it's a step towards empowering people to really not only just be able to think about the best decisions they could make, but to actually choose them. I had one of my staff members who's a young man, was just getting married and loved what he does at the center. You know? Yeah. And he said, with the last couple increases, I really can not just want to make a career here, but I believe I can. It's sacrificial. I'm not going to make what I could make in the tech industry another place. Yeah. But I can make a living. I can have a wife and kids and do this. And so for me, those are hopeful statements. They're not the great statements, what it would be if we were saying, yes, you can make here what you make someplace else.
Name what it was. It will appear.
But the reality is that for people to be able to choose that. And I get it. We have families that are making too big of sacrifices to be able to send their kids to a Christian school. And I have teachers that have spent a career that have not made and had some things that would have been nice for them to have. They've never driven new cars, those kind of things. That isn't right. But so we've got some, but I would tell you most of them would not argue that they would change their life for a reason. You mean, because it has been purposeful. It has, and it does feel good, even though it hurts sometimes.
Yeah. So Christian schools, you know, developments in Christian mental health, all that kind of stuff. It's really good to hear from you, Merle. And if you're in Champion, go to Merle's place. It's Merle Skinner and Tell us the name of the organization.
Christian Family and Children's Center. Okay.
Christian Family and Children's Center.
Yeah, and it's the website is www.champion.org. And so there's a lot of cool things going there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that do school, do daycare there. We do multiple things, of course, counseling, family work. But this new facility will be exciting because we're hoping to bring some major Christian artists in and some things like that to be able to do that, as well as host. So we're setting it up to be able to do multiple things. So
and when you're building, that means you need people to go there and you need people to build with you. And I've been there. I've been to the center. Great place.
Yeah, so. You too, Rich. And we do need to collaborate more. We need to find ways to get together more.
I hope that we can go to Harrisburg again.
We just need to do multiple things together. And
Absolutely.
It's like everything else. The time is the factor, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. We always end the show. We let our guests, pray for the folks, and I just say, we should lift up a prayer for any family member, who has children, who's in a school situation where they need an alternative, and really looking for that. If you'd pray for that for us,
I'd love to do that. So, Father, it's been great to be here today. I just am so thankful for what you're doing through Rich and his team here. God, I pray blessings upon them, favor. Father, I pray that you would open doors where barriers exist, that, Father, you would come against those things. Father, help them to be able to continue to be focused and to keep moving forward in the kingdom, because, Father, we need them. Lord, for the listeners today, for people, whatever time they hear this or see this, God, if they're struggling, I pray, Father, that you would remind them that it is through adversity that you are empowered. And that, Father, that they should never waste a good crisis. The crisis points in their lives, whatever they are times for change. And Lord, as Rich has talked about today, change is hard. It doesn't feel good. But Father, it is what you're about. And so, Father, we will consider it all joy, brethren, when we face various trials, because these things produce an opportunity for you to speak into our lives. And so do that. Father, we pray for this whole, the Wild West of counseling and education in our culture. And Father, we're excited because there's rumors of revival happening. And so, Father, we pray that we, Rich's organization, ours, many, many others across the country, could be a place where people, when they experience your Holy Spirit in a new way, that, Father, there would be places for them to run to be fed, to be healed, to be nourished, Father, to have more and more impact. God, thank you for this time, and we pray that you would bless it and protect it. Father, in the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen. Amen. Dr. Merle Skinner.
Dr. Rich Hoffman. God bless you, brother.
God bless you. Thanks, everybody.